Welcome to this edition of the $1 Million Mastermind Podcast. This is where we pick the brains of high achievers from all walks of life and get their hard-earned, real-world insights on winning. I'm your host, Larry Weidel. How did you, you're coming up through there and somehow, you must have somehow got yourself ready to handle this idea. And I'm curious why you say accidental entrepreneur. Was that related to the idea, how the idea came, or that the idea came and then, hey, we could make this into a product, or who's going to do that? I would do it. How is that accidental?
Yeah. So the backstory was.
And you became a founder. All of a sudden now you're a founder.
I'm a founder. And I had worked for founders.
Yeah.
And incredible founders, directly or indirectly, between Ted Turner and didn't work for Steve Case, but worked for people who Steve Jobs, but didn't work for people, or I should say, worked for people who worked for Steve Jobs. And then ultimately, when we were acquired, obviously Steve Case was running America Online, and another incredible entrepreneur. One way to become an entrepreneur or founder is to, go and study these people and say, I'm going to go work for them, and then I'm going to start my own thing. But that was not my plan. My plan was actually focused on cool companies that I was curious about and were exciting. And that was it. And I left America Online in 2001. I was pregnant with my third at that point, and I had my second and third very close to one another. And so I decided to take a little bit of a break. I didn't know how long that break was going to be. And it wasn't until I was actually spending more time eating healthy, feeding my young kids healthy stuff, that I started to realize that or feel like I was a hypocrite, because I was telling my children and feeding my children better for you things. And then I would look down at the ingredients in my Diet Coke and think, I don't even know what I'm drinking. I mean, it's sort of ironic, and so I decided one day that I was going to just give it up. And because it just wasn't in line with how what I wanted in my house. And I wanted more, healthy things, but also much more understandable things, I guess is the best way to look at it. And so when I started looking for alternatives to Diet Coke, I thought, I should be drinking water. Water is the healthiest thing that you can do. Somewhere along the way, people said 8 glasses of water. I had been told that many years, but I thought, well, why don't I do that? Why don't I drink water? I don't drink water because I found it boring. And I could answer that question very honestly. And I thought, well, maybe while I'm taking a break, what I should do is figure out how to make water more interesting. And so I started slicing up water and put it in the glass, not thinking about calories or anything like that. I'm like, I solved my problem. And then I realized that I had another problem, which was that I had to buy a lot of fruit over and over and over again, because it only lasted so long in the refrigerator, the pictures that I was creating. And another thing happened when I made this switch. I lost a lot of weight that I assumed was just how I was supposed to be.
Right.
So in 2.5 weeks, I lost over 20 pounds. Over the course of a year, I lost almost 60 pounds. I mean, I significant. And I never thought that the Diet Coke and weight were like tied to one another. I assumed that this was just the way my body was wanting to be. And, now I look at diet sweeteners as, releasing insulin. I mean, there's a lot of things that have come out about these diet sweeteners. But again, I was drinking the Kool-Aid, so to speak, for many, many years, thinking that diet was better for me. But again, I had time now, taking a break from my tech job, to sort of think about these things. But when I went to my local store, Whole Foods had just opened, and I went there looking for a product that didn't have diet sweeteners in it, that just tasted better and was closer to what I was making in my kitchen. That's when I realized two things. There wasn't a product like I was making in my kitchen, and also how many, many people, friends of mine, had been convinced that, or tricked, I should say, by these healthy perception items, like vitamin water was a huge product on the market.
Yeah.
I was fooled by, diet drinks. But I thought, how many people could be helped by a product like I was making in my kitchen that don't know it's possible? And there is billions of dollars being spent on, trying to market to these people and the diet industry. But again, I sort of hadn't kind of done the business plan and ran all the numbers around it. My gut told me that if you could actually create something like I was creating in my kitchen, that you could help a lot of people. And so I asked the guy at the local Whole Foods who was stocking the shelves, in the beverage aisle. I said, so what does it take to get a product into your store? A logical question.
Right.
And he said, are you interested in the local producers plan that we have with different local producers? And I said, sure. Yeah. And he said, so you produce locally? And I said, I do. I'm thinking about it. I didn't say it out loud, but I make it in my kitchen.
Yeah.
I thought, well, this will be a lot of fun. I'm going to get a product on the shelf. But again, the word entrepreneur, the word founder, the word creator, visionary, none of those were even crossing, none of it was. And so, I think often, like, if you think too much about the end, right, you'll never get past the beginning.
Right. Yeah. That's exactly.
So that was the early, days of Hint. And again, I call
the other thing is to get to the point where you think this would be fun. You've reached that point with a lot of the things that you've done up to this point in terms of jobs, whether you know it or not. Like with CNN or with that company out there, it's like, hey, that would be fun. That would be, that'd be cool. And so you reach that same point in your mind about this thing, and from there on, you were just kind of screwed yourself, because now you're going to follow what was fun.
Yeah, and I think I was doing an interview with somebody the other day. I really did prioritize having fun. I was always that person.
Yeah,
and just a quick example, my dad had one rule in our house, which was we always had to be in sports. And sometimes the sport that we were best at was not that time of year. So for that sport. So, I would figure out what other sports we could do. So, I'd go play softball. And I quickly recognized that I was not a great softball player, but I was fascinated by people who were really good at softball. And I would study them and really understand kind of, how and why they were good at it. And I realized that very quickly that I didn't have to be the best at everything. What I had to do was be able to go out there and have a good time. And that is, I think, how I've made decisions about what I want to work on, what job I want to have. First, led by curiosity, can I actually be engaged in spending my time there? Because I have always believed that you have choices, right, on where you do spend your time. But are the people that are going to be around you kind of helping you to stay curious? Yeah. And I think that, I mentioned earlier when I was at AOL, I got to a level which I think a lot of people get to as they're sort of rising through the ranks, where you've got people that you are managing and people that are teaching. And I think that there's nothing wrong with that. But when you are the most knowledgeable person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what leads to dissatisfaction in, your role within an organization, maybe even in life, right? I think we're as humans, if we don't stay curious, if we don't keep raising the bar for ourselves, then you're unhappy.
Well, there's two things, if you don't mind me pointing out.
Absolutely.
The winning track that you're on has been, following intent, and it's the founder's journey is following the breadcrumbs, following your natural curiosity. I don't talk about it much, but my cousin is H. Edward Roberts. He's the one who invented the personal computer, the Altair. Bill Gates and Paul Allen left Harvard and went to Albuquerque to do the software, and so that's where Microsoft came from.
Wow!
Yeah, the name of the company was Micro Instrumentation, and so they were Microsoft, the software for the.
That's incredible.
Company, but he said always told me, and this was I talked to him before I went to Georgia Tech, started to, how can I get the most out of the experience? And he said, always follow your natural curiosity. He said the schools, the corporations, they want to beat it out of you, but as long as you follow your natural curiosity, you'll stay fresh, you'll stay alive. And so, he was a founder, Gates, and Steve Jobs and all of these guys, Ted Turner, they're following their natural curiosity. And then the other thing is they're following growth. You said it earlier. They wanted profit margins and this, that, and the other. And that's the established companies. They want to hold their position. They want to get a certain yield because they're answering to, there's reasons for it. They got stockholders and CEOs that they don't hit those quarterly numbers. They're gone. Even the CEO's gone. So they've got reasons to be rigid and stay, inside those boundaries. But when you're the up and coming company, the most fun is growing, figuring out bigger, faster, quicker, better, more fun. Wouldn't it be fun to be over here? How about if we could go over here? How about if we could expand over there? Wonder what that would be like, And so you're out, you said you're mainly in the United States right now. It's would it be fun to be, in 120 countries? What would that feel like? Step by step, you start probing the future. But that's how, I just want to point that out to people. What's funneling your drive and keeping you on a really successful course is those kind of two things, and that's what gets you past. That's a good thing because you have doubt at every step of the way. You wrote your book Undaunted, but you have doubt every time you get a new challenge, which is every day of the year. And so you figure, what are we going to do now? But that following your natural curiosity, wonder if we did it this way. What if we talked, wonder what we'd find out if we talked to them, if we investigated that market. And then You just say, wouldn't it be fun if we could do that? That gets you through, that helps power you through a lot of doubt.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like the other thing that happens, with any startup is that you have, maybe you call it luck, but you also are opportunistic, right? And so
opportunistic.
100%, no matter what category, what industry you're in. And so you recognize that, things are going to happen along the way that you just have no idea. You didn't plan on that. And I think that the more times that happens, you get used to it.
For those of you who are sick and tired of fooling around and are dead serious about wanting to move up fast, I've got something especially for you. I've combined the best insights from over 40 years in business and making $70 million in income and compressed them into a free webinar. That's right, it's a free resource. If you want to find out exactly what the concepts are that I use in coaching $1 million earners, register now at WeidelOnWinning.com. You'll discover the 5-part framework used by so many to reach their financial, personal, and professional goals. You can find that link in this episode's show notes.
So I think like what's hard if you continue to work inside of a very established company that is public, private equity, whatever it is, they like predictability. Well,
right.
The people who are starting new industries are used to things not being so predictable. Yeah. And so they end up being the people that you actually want to put into crisis situations.
Yeah.
That if you look at sort of, the last couple of years of the pandemic, the people that could actually, not in every industry, but, could weather the storm and think fast and keep moving forward were the ones that had sort of either been in a startup and had been used to that or they had grown up in that kind of environment, maybe if they're at a large company. So, but, look at Airbnb, for example.
Right.
I mean, everything was shutting down. It looked like the end of the world. They didn't, Brian, who runs the company, was not sitting there staying complacent. He was actually figuring out a question that, I ask myself every day, like, what can we do? And if you're not asking yourself that question when you start to hit those roadblocks in life and business, whatever, then that's a problem.
Yeah, and that feeds the primary thing is like the hardest job any of us have is to keep ourselves excited about our work and what we're supposed to be doing. And finding other ways, intriguing ways, better ways of doing that, what that does serves to motivate us. It's like, oh, I've got an idea. Let's see how that turns out. It's just like someone, if you're a painter, you get an idea for a painting or for a song, if you're, and you can't wait to kind of try it out. And so that's what the leader is supposed to be doing. But the end result is the leader stays fired up. And that puts you in the mentality to be able to have that vision or that vibe when you enter the building or you get in a meeting. You've got something, there's a pulse going on inside of you, but it doesn't just come. It comes because you're thinking about where can we go? How quick? Now, when you came in and you got something like, it was an idea, it would be cool. But when you start with a cool idea, a lot as you get into it, and I imagine this happened for you, there's a lot of positive unintended consequences and applications that come to you later that get you even more excited about being on pushing that button. So how did that happen for you as you got into the business?
Well, first of all, so I had seen for myself how, shifting this, habit that I had of drinking diet soda into water, how much it had helped me. But I'll never forget. It was the first week that we had actually launched in Whole Foods. I received an email from a consumer. Nobody at the time, 17 years ago, was putting emails on bottles of, products that went on in the food category. We had done that in tech. Anytime that you were putting software, there was a customer service number that you could easily reach people, but it was not a common practice amongst food and beverage companies. But again, having come from a different industry, I was like, okay, well, if we have room, we should put that on the bottle. Yeah. So that first week, I heard from a consumer, and he wrote me. And of course, he thinks that it's this big customer service team. It's me, it's the founder, right? And he said, I'm picked up a bottle of this product. Thank you so much for finally creating Hint. I've been looking for a product that doesn't have diet sweeteners in it. I have a disease called type 2 diabetes. And I thought, I've heard of type 1 diabetes, but I had never heard of type 2 diabetes. So I said, would you mind hopping on a phone call with me? I'm very curious. And so he went on to share with me that he had this thing called type 2 diabetes, and he doesn't know how he got it. He wasn't born with it. And what he figured out, that he couldn't find any doctors to say this, but through his own experience, was that he would actually have insulin spikes every time he had diet sweeteners. And so he was figuring out, he was trying to find a product like Hint because he wanted to solve his, health issue and drink better tasting water. But that wasn't the reason why I developed the product. But all of a sudden I was seeing that it had a bigger market fit.
Right.
What I had imagined for it. Yeah. And so here he was saying, thank you. A total stranger, somebody who, didn't know I was going to create this product. And so that's something that I think is also really important for anybody thinking about developing a company. And sort of, I think any founder would tell you this, is having a connection with the consumer and the consumers. Yeah. I mean, that's fuel for you. And if you don't actually understand what your consumer is thinking, then, you're like, if you don't sit, I would still get on a customer service call to really understand what consumers are thinking about different, because you have to be able to have that connection. So I would say that was, kind of the early piece that really kept me going on sort of, the other hours in the day. I was dealing with buyers that were saying, no, we're not interested in bringing in your product because you don't have the right experience. It's not proven that your product. And then on a few other hours during the day, I was actually trying to figure out how to create this product to have a longer shelf life. I hadn't figured that out yet. Yeah. And I think that's the other thing that I learned from the tech industry, which again was not really something that was practiced in the food industry. When you think about when people launch products in the food and beverage industry, they launch it and then it's either a success or it's a failure. Right. In the tech industry, you launch something and then there's an update, an upgrade. Yeah. Right. And that's the way that industry works. And so sort of being able to be in an industry like that and bring that learning and that thinking, it was really, I mean, that's the way that disruption happens in industries. It's not typically people who come from the industry that are actually going to change the industry. And
as you look at everything with a different slant, it's like
you do. Yeah.
That's why kids are so good, in a certain situation. Kids come in and say, why do you do it that way? And they come in with a clear eye.
Yeah. And I mean, a part of, even hiring people over the years, I mean, I've said, like, this idea of only hiring people in who have 5 years experience or, probably not. I mean, maybe you want some of those people, but you also have to have a team. Teams work best, and teams will be more creative when you don't have all the same people sitting in a room with the same knowledge base that, they bring something else into the room.
Yeah.
And so I think like that kind of startup mentality, I think it was something that, again, I go back and look at as really, enormously important for Hint.
Thanks for listening to the $1 Million Mastermind. If you felt there were any valuable takeaways from this episode, please take a minute and leave us a 5-star review. Your feedback is important and really helps us get the word out to a wider audience. Remember, we have a valuable webinar that is absolutely free. Register for it right now at whitealumwinning.com. Thanks for listening.